attuale questo sta nel mezzo in fondi, cui angelo non si crucificato in conoscing problems, by passion is a crucial, and the resurrection is glory unto the God, bringing Christendom on all strong. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
St. Thomas Aquinas,
Pray for us.
St. Pius X,
Pray for us.
teach on the encyclicals. The great encyclicals running from the early 1800s through to, as it then was, the 1920s. I mean, the church had not yet gone crazy in Father Lefroy's time. And then the church went crazy in the 1960s. Or the churchmen went crazy in the 1960s. And the Archbishop, when the Archbishop started his seminary in the 1970s, he instituted what I don't think he'd had in his day, a course on the encyclicals, a course on the full-blooded church teaching on the modern eras. And I heard him quoted once saying to somebody, you know, we need to make more use of the encyclicals. And you're dead right. The encyclicals those encyclicals nailed the great errors of the modern age. And the modern age squealed, especially the syllabus. We may have a look at the syllabus in the next within the next 48 hours, because it really made the liberals yell. It really hit the, what's the right expression? It really
touched a nerve.
It touched a nerve, yes, you could say that. It hit the modern age where it hurts, where the modern age hurts. And the modern age didn't like it. And Gladstone, the great Liberal Prime Minister of England, who was no Catholic, and I'm sure was anywhere near the Catholic Church, he yelled, I mean, come on, this is a Catholic business, you know, this is not, he's not, you don't have to worry about what a Catholic says, but he did worry.
Yes.
Because the modern church was hitting on exactly what the modern world is doing wrong. The syllabus was hitting on exactly the problem. So, what you've got here is a schema. And what you've got down at the bottom, how many of you have seen this one before? It seems that Antonio's seen this one before. Anybody else seen it before?
Well, not exactly that way, but I saw something very similar, which...
Well, maybe this is the medieval church down there. So the whole of Christendom is Catholic. So that's the whole of Christendom, from there to there. Going all the way from there, I hope you can all see, I was big enough for all of you to see. That's the medieval church. And then along comes Protestantism.
My Lord, what about the Orthodox?
Don't worry about those. That's another story. That's further back, it's another story. The Protestants, the modern problem doesn't really begin with the Orthodox. The modern problem begins with Protestantism. Protestantism is the root of the modern eras. Okay, so Protestantism, which is in the 16th century, so 16 and a C for century, the 16th century, and Protestants. Where are we? Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I got this wrong. Below me, I've jumped too high. Protestantism is down here. This is Protestantism. So Protestantism is taking about a third of Christendom, about a third, and it's yanking it off to the left. Grace alone, Scripture alone, and faith alone, isn't it? The tremendous heresy of Protestantism, which undermined the whole of Catholic teaching and the whole of the Catholic Church, and it broke Christendom. From then on, Christendom was fractured. Christendom had been solid in Europe for the Orthodox are off to the east, Constantinople, Byzantium. Being, you remember the five ages of the church. The fourth age of the church had lasted about 1,000 years. Prior to that, the age of the apostles, the age of the martyrs, the age of the doctors, and then the things stabilized and tranquilized, and you've got 1,000 years with not much heresy. There is heresy, but there's not much. And it's just tranquil, more or less tranquil. The church is always in trouble, but it's relatively tranquil, 1,000 years. The church peacefully possessing civilization. And then the heresy, the later Middle Ages get decadent, and the heresy of Protestantism breaks out with Martin Luther in 1517. And a whole chunk of the church swings left. When the church reacts with the Counter-Reformation. Let me see if the green pen has got any gas in it. We'll use the green pen. Green for good. Red for bad, green for good. Counter-Reformation. Oh, that's black. Oh, brother. With a green lid and black. Oh, boy. It's all right, it's not all in that. Counter-Reformation. The Counter-Reformation opposes Protestantism, and it's, that should be further down, it's rebuilding the church. And the church begins to expand again. The church is expanding, but then there's 1789, dear. 1789, liberalism. Liberalism is like, is a 1789, the French Revolution. Liberalism breaks out. It comes, the Counter-Reformation in the 16th century, so liberalism, there's another 250 years of Catholic civilization, 1517 to 1789. Not exactly 250, but about 250, and about 2.5 centuries, which the Jesuits are the counterattack of the Catholic Church. The Jesuits spearhead the counterattack of the Catholic Church against Protestantism. St. Ignatius is a contemporary of Luther, and while Luther is going to sort out the church by rebelling, St. Ignatius sorts out the church by converting. That's the spiritual exercises which some of you have done, which we inherit from St. Ignatius, who he founded the spiritual exercises in a modern form at least. And every pope since that time, every Catholic pope since that time, has praised the spiritual exercises and commended them and recommended them. And they have been a tremendous means of fortifying Catholics against the world being shaken and broken by Protestantism, infiltrated by Protestantism. So you've got 250 years of Catholicism and Protestantism slugging it out. Then the French Revolution means, in fact, it's a rerun of Protestantism. It's in the form of liberalism. It's more subtle than Protestantism. It's less of a sledgehammer. It's more of a sort of scalpel. It's liberalism pretends to be Catholic. Actually, both Protestantism pretends to be Catholic and liberalism pretends to be Catholic. What you've got is one form after another of fake Catholicism, because you've got to, since in the Fourth Age the Church has triumphed. Everybody knows that the Catholic Church is where it's at and what we should be. We should all be Catholic and so on. So everybody has to pay homage to Catholicism, but they don't want to be Catholic. So all of this is hypocrisy. It's all a pretense of being Catholic without the reality. It's a break with Catholicism while pretending to be Catholic still. So liberalism is a more refined form of Protestantism. Liberty, equality, fraternity. Liberalism doesn't pretend to be a religion like Protestantism did, but in effect it's serving as it's a whole worldview pretending to save the world, and it's basically rerunning the ideas of Protestantism, but it's Protestantism inside Catholic countries. For instance, the liberalism breaks out in France, which is a Catholic country, where the Jesuits have been at work, and many other prophets and many religious saints have been at work, Roman saints have been at work for 250 years. Saint Francis de Sales, Saint Vincent, what was his name? Saint Vincent de Paul, St. John Hughes, and so on. So France has been, and France had a great, there was a good deal of Catholicism in the 17th century France. France got its Catholic act together, so to speak, but in the 18th century, the 17th century Catholicism soured with Jansenism. Jansenism was a form of Protestant Catholicism, and Jansenism led to liberalism. Jansenism is very, very strict, so you get everybody to be very, very, very strict on the right, and then the pendulum swings, it's unbalanced, it's too far out, and the pendulum swings in the opposite direction, and you get somebody who's very, very strict suddenly becoming very, very liberal. And so Jansenists turned into liberals. The same thing happened in England. The Puritans turned into Whigs, W-H-I-G-S, about the same time, towards the end of the 17th century. The Catholicism had been knocked out in England by then, stamped out by the wicked governments of Henry VIII and Elizabeth I and James VI. Being really, the British are tough. When they, they're implacable. When they put their foot on the church and just like somebody would stamp on an insect and crush it out. That's what the English did to the Catholic Church in England. So the Catholic Church had been knocked out. But nevertheless, there were Protestants. The Cavaliers were semi-Catholic Protestants. In other words, you had this tendency amongst the Protestants, so those who wanted to stay, they still had a great respect for the Catholic Church, and they wanted to be like Catholics. And in fact, of course, between them and the Puritans, it came to an outright war, the Civil War in England of the 1640s. And of course, King Charles I had his head cut off. But then the English did come back after Oliver Cromwell did his thing. The English restored the monarchy, even though it was gutted, even though it was powerless, comparatively powerless. And then, of course, there was the constitutional monarchy, and then the liberals took over. So the liberals took over in England. The Puritans morphed into liberals, Whigs, and then the Whigs dominated English politics for a long time. That was the Glorious Revolution of 1688. In France, the Protestantism seeping into the Catholic Church, seeping into the Counter-Reformation Church. The Protestantism took a virulent form against Jansenism. Jansenism morphed into liberalism. Liberalism produced the French Revolution of 1789. Freemasonry was launched in London in 1717. Freemasonry generated liberalism. Liberalism is the result of Protestantism dividing from Catholicism. When Catholicism was in possession of civilization, it was the truth, everybody knew it, no problem. In Catholic Austria, Beethoven said, God and, what is it in French, ground bass, or the basic rules of music. God and the basic rules of music you don't question, said Beethoven. In Catholic Europe, in medieval Europe, you didn't question Catholicism. It was in serene and complete possession. But then when Protestantism set up shop, you then have two completely different systems. And so, a soul says, which is true? They can't both be true, so which is true? So the Protestants seem good guys, they're strict. Now the Catholics can seem quite sloppy guys sometimes, so which is true? The Protestants say that, the Catholics are easygoing. The Roundheads are the Cavaliers. The Roundheads are strict, and they've got strict morals, whereas the Cavaliers are, enjoy wine and women. So you've got a choice. And then what happens is the liberals come in and say, okay, you Catholics, okay, you Protestants, don't worry. You be a good Protestant and you be a good Catholic, and that way we'll all be happy, we'll live together, and we won't have any more of these terrible religious wars. That's liberalism. In other words, your different beliefs, your different doctrines don't matter. Doctrine doesn't matter. What matters is to be a nice guy and to live united. Unity in front of truth. Let's get together, let's all love one another, let's worry about the things that separate us, let's concentrate on the things that unite us. That's another great slogan of the liberals. So, liberalism arises from the existence of Protestantism alongside Catholicism, opposite Catholicism, and the liberals come along and say, doctrine doesn't matter, let's all get on together. It's the Peace of Westphalia of 1648. And liberalism, it doesn't sweep off countries like Protestantism did, but it sweeps off the politics. Liberalism has the effect of separating politics from religion. Religion is kicked out of politics by liberalism. And this means that the liberals say, look, every man in private can have his own religion, that's not a problem. But in public, we're going to agree to disagree. In public, we're not going to be Catholic, we're not going to be Protestant. The state will not be Protestant or Catholic, but just the individuals. And the individuals will be what they like in their own lives. That's liberalism. We'll see, what the problem is that it's not too difficult to see. The problem is that, well, no, we won't go into that. So, liberalism arises from the coexistence of Protestantism with Catholicism. Without Protestantism, there would never become liberalism. So liberalism is, let's all be free, freedom for everybody, let's agree to differ, ideas don't matter all that much. What matters is getting on together, being good guys. You can have what religion you like in private, only don't force it on anyone, try to force it on anybody in public. That's the United States, which is soaked in liberalism. Okay, and of course England also. England, but in a different way from the United States. That's liberalism. So the church reacts with the 19th century popes. The 19th century popes react against liberalism. They're fighting liberalism. As the Counter-Reformation fought Protestantism, the 19th century popes fight liberalism. And the 19th century popes write the encyclicals, starting one of the first is 1832 Mirari Vos of Gregory XVI. That's one of the first. And these are the encyclicals that Archbishop Lefebvre loved, and wanted to use. An encyclical is, from the Greek, it's like cycle, a bicycle. Monocycle is a cycle with just one wheel, a bicycle is a cycle with two wheels, a tricycle is a cycle with three wheels. So cycle means wheel, a circle wheel. So it's a letter, it's a circular letter which is going to go the round of all of the bishops of the world. That's why it's called an encyclical letter. It's a letter from the Pope to the bishops of the world. Therefore, the encyclicals are written for bishops. So they're on a substantial level. But the Archbishop loved them because they are the answer to liberalism, which is a tremendous problem in the modern world. If Protestantism originated the problems of the modern world, liberalism certainly developed them and brought them apparently less hateful towards Catholicism, but more undermining. At least the Protestants stood up and said, we hate you, we're going to smash you. It was an open fight. Liberalism, we love you, but we also love Protestants. We love everybody. We're agreeing with everybody. It's apparently friendly, but in reality, it's deadly. It's more subtle. It undermines. It's more deadly in a way than Protestantism. And it has liberalism compared with Protestantism has this. The Protestant is wrong, but at least his mind is still firm. Luther says, here I stand, I can do no other. He takes a stand. He's not wishy-washy. Luther is not wishy-washy. But every liberal is wishy-washy. By his very principles, he's wishy-washy. Because he says, ideas don't matter. Let's all agree to disagree. No problem. Let's not make a problem of doctrine or a problem of ideas. Let's just live together and be happy together and coexist together. And let's each man have his own convictions in private and so on. Liberalism is apparently nicer than Protestantism, but it's more deadly. And liberalism, the modern world is full of liberalism. Protestants morph into liberals. Protestants turn into liberals. You get today, there are few convinced Protestants. They do still exist. But the general state of people's minds today is liberalism. In philosophy, it's Kant. Kant, the deadly Kant. Terrible Kant. Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher. Terrible. Terrible, terrible. He systematized the idea that ideas are useless because he created a system around the proposition that we cannot know reality. The mind cannot know reality. You may remember Vashendy and a number of schemes together with connected with Vashendy. So we cannot know reality, and that, then the mind really is at sea, and that's the heart. Kant and the liberal Kant, Uranian, disconnected the mind modernism. That's the heart of modernism. That the mind, therefore, truth is just as there are 100 people, there are 100 truths. That's Kant, but he systematized it. He made it into a system. And you go to any university today, you go to the philosophy department, and it's built on Kant. It's never built on St. Thomas Aquinas. Today, not even the Catholic universities are built on St. Thomas Aquinas. St. Thomas Aquinas is included in the syllabus, but the basis is the automatic supposition is that if you want to philosophize, you're going to have to start out from Kant. That's liberalism. Okay. The 19th century popes stand up to liberalism, and again the church expands. There's a great missionary effort in the 19th century. For instance, Africa is opened up in the 19th century. The missionaries, a lot of French missionaries go to Africa and begin to this country which has only been had contact with Europeans more or less around its coast. The Europeans have never penetrated much into the interior. With the 19th century missions, the Catholics go into the inside of the country, and so Africa opens up. Also Asia, Oceania opens up with missions. So the Catholic Church once again begins to expand. It gets its act together, and again it expands. That's the pattern. Pulls itself together, expands. Corrupts, shrinks. Pulls itself together, expands. Corrupts, shrinks, and so on. Okay. Then, we've got a narrative one, because this was not a great chunk of the church. Easily most of the church stayed on track, but just a little bit. And this is modernism. And that's around the end of the 1900s. And that's more subtle still. That's still more subtle than liberalism. Liberalism is more subtle and poisonous than Protestantism. Modernism is more subtle and poisonous than liberalism or Protestantism. The heresy gets more and more refined as time goes on. Modernism is a handful of Catholics at the end of the 19th century who are glamorized, they're beglamored, they're bewitched by the wonderful modern world that is being created by the liberals and the Protestants. They're glamorized and they say, hey, what's so wrong with the modern world? It's okay. Look at the progress in science. Look at the progress all over the world. Look at the development of the nations. Look at our free politics. Look how we all get on now. And so the modern world is, in its own way, it is glamorous. And once you see through it loses its. It's not nearly as glamorous as it looks, but it does look glamorous. If you don't look deep, it's very attractive. People mow their lawns, and the trains run on time, and you can catch a train from London to Bristol in 2 hours, what used to be in Jane Austen's day a journey of what, with the stagecoaches, 3 or 4 days from London to Bristol. Does anybody know Jane Austen at all? From London to Bath? I don't know. I don't know what I know. A 3-day journey now in 2 hours. So today, of course, with an aeroplane, it's 1 hour, whatever. The trains are faster, the airplanes are even faster. Look at progress. There's been marvelous material progress that has been. So there's been the missions, the Africa has been opened up, Asia has been opened up, but there's also been great material progress, because as things spiritual have been made doubtful by liberalism, Protestantism and liberalism, as it seems that there's no one clear truth any longer, as it used to seem in the Middle Ages, then things, as religion becomes purely personal, then religion is obviously not that important. You can't tell the truth is unknowable, we don't know the truth, so it's not that important. So where do the best of men's minds go? If they're no longer going to things spiritual, they're going to go to things material. And therefore, as the spiritual is discredited, so things materialism rises. Materialism rises, and as men give their minds to things material, then the best of men give the best of their minds. Well, not some very talented men give the best of their minds to things material. Materialism flourishes, and that's a large part of why the modern world is so glamorous, because of the flourishing of materialism. Trains, motor cars, aeroplanes, the electronics today, and so on and so on. And this material progress has gone on ever since. And it's a child, essentially, again, of Protestantism and liberalism. The Catholic Church does not set so much. Catholics don't care so much for material progress. It's okay, it's not in itself sinful, but it's not that important, and it's not where it's at. Where it's at for Catholics is to get into heaven. Money and materialism and all of that, dangerous. There's a danger there. So the Catholics don't worry about materialism. But liberalism and Protestants develop materialism. They develop a very successful and glamorous modern world. And the modernists, to the point that the peoples are falling away. The missions are operational, but a lot of the European peoples are falling away from the faith. The faith is being undermined by liberalism, Protestantism, liberalism especially. And so the popes have to fight it. According as they fight it, so the church does expand in the 19th century. But by the end of this 19th century, there are these Catholics who say, hey, look, the modern world is triumphant, it succeeds, it works. So once again, so how do we now? We've got to develop find a new way of pretending to be Catholic while not being Catholic. Going with the material progress, going with modern science, going with materialism, going with liberalism, while still appearing to be Catholic. And this is modernism. Modernism is it's keeping the appearances while emptying out the substance. So it's like, I'll give the example of a pharmacist overnight. In the afternoon of Wednesday, you go into the pharmacist shop, and all the little pills are each in their bottles with the correct label. Then, in the middle of the night, somebody breaks into the pharmacist, empties out all the little jars, great heap of pills on the floor, and then the pills are loaded back into the jars. The label is the same, the little pill jars are the same, but the contents are quite different. That's modernism. So you're going to empty out this classic and very simple example, the resurrection. The content, the original content, the Wednesday afternoon content of the resurrection is that the actual physical body of our Lord, the one that was crucified on the cross, that died on the cross because the body and the soul were torn apart by the terrible crucifixion, and he was dead. The separation of the body and the soul meant the death of our Lord's humanity. As a man, he was dead. The body and the soul were brought together by God, by our Lord himself, on Sunday morning. And as the body and the soul were brought together again, so the man came back to life. And he, with a different body, a same body and yet mysteriously different, and it broke out of the tomb, stones couldn't hold it. That's what Catholics believe. That's the reality. That's the proper content of that bottle. But now, it's difficult to believe because people don't usually rise from the dead. You don't usually get people bursting out of the grave and walking through walls and talking and then eating fish and so on, as we know our risen Lord did, as we know from the Gospels that our risen Lord did. So what do you do? Well, the modernist says that what the resurrection really means is that when 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 living human beings are getting together, and when they all are thinking of Jesus Christ and they're all loving Jesus Christ comes back to life amongst them. That's the resurrection. Of course, that doesn't require any faith at all. That's just completely natural. That's just people feeling good because they're all thinking about Jesus. So, so the content is quite different, but they keep the same word. That's modernism. You keep all the words, you keep all the appearances, but the content is completely changed. Therefore, these characters are threatened. There are only a handful of them, but a number of them are priests, and they threaten. There is a very serious threat because they will completely empty out the Catholic religion and the Catholic Church if they're left. So the one who fights that is Pius X. And that, of course, is exactly why Archbishop of Trent chose Pius X as to name the society. The Society of Pius X is named because, as the Archbishop knew, that today's problem is just like modernism, and therefore the patron of the society is the man who really administered the body of modernism, and that was Pius X by the great encyclical Pascendi in 1907, and Lamentably, which is a list of modern errors, like the syllabus, nailed by Pius X, and Pius X's Scotch modernism. If you picked up a Catholic seminary manual of, let's say, 1930 or 1940, you would read in it, modernism was a slight little problem raised by argumentative French priests. We're not French. We know better than to get into silly arguments amongst priests like that. So, but it's over and done with. Modernism is finished. It's dead. It was dealt with by Pius X, and we are now great Catholics. Here, again, the church actually did expand. There was some tremendous 20th. There was also some tremendous 20th century mission work. The church had a great flourishing at the very beginning of the 20th century under Pius X. For instance, there were in England, it was the generation of Benson, Chesterton, Belloc, before the First World War and after the First World War. It was a good time for the church. And in France, there was likewise, at the same time, there was a flourishing of the church. But the devil doesn't sleep. And so, while Pius X scotched it, apparently, this disease of wanting to adapt the church to the modern world, which is modernism. That's why it's called modernism. Because you want to change the substance of Catholicism to fit the modern world. The modern world is intrinsically, it's anti-Catholic, it's against Catholicism. It's very uncomfortable to live as a Catholic in the modern world because the modern world is so deep down, subtly, insidiously, cleverly, pressure, but a strong pressure in the modern world against being a Catholic. And so I'm in this tension and this crossfire and I don't like it, so I'm going to empty out the substance of Catholicism. I'm going to change it so that it will fit the modern world. That's modernism. Okay. Well, the modern world just gets more and more, and there are more and more Catholics that are tempted by the idea that we need to adapt the fuddy-duddy old church, the medieval church, the Constantinian church, the Tridentine Church. It's too old and old-fashioned. Contraception, for goodness sakes. How can a married couple possibly live in a modern city and have all the children that they would have if they weren't able to use contraception? And that, of course, that's a real example of the pressure of the modern world upon Catholic morals. Of course, artificial means of birth control are wrong, they're intrinsically wrong, and they will always be wrong. They always have been wrong. They always will be wrong. But that's severe. That's difficult. The church has got to get with it. We can't. It's impossible to not use artificial means of birth control today. It's just not possible. The church is out of touch. I'm sure you've heard of this kind of thing. So we go through 2 world wars, which shape the whole civilization and make all ideas questionable and promote liberalism, because when some Nazis, for instance, have some strong and clear ideas, well, they murder, they gas 6 million Jews, so it's thought, and ideas take another discrediting, which is another great advance of liberalism. Modernism is, of course, in sync with liberalism and Protestantism. It's liberalism and Protestantism brought even more subtly, even more deeply inside the church. This time, the attack is always against the church. Protestantism is obviously against the Catholic Church. Liberalism more subtly against the Catholic Church, but undermining the Catholic Church. Modernism undermining the very doctrine of the church, every doctrine of the church, everything of the church needs to be updated. You need to update the Ave Maria, you need to update the Stations of the Cross, you need to, if anything isn't updated, it's not living, it's not real, it's not authentic. Everything has to be changed in order to be authentic. That's the idea of modernism. Well, the modern world is pressing more and more, so by the 1960s, this time, it's the great mass of Catholics that swing to the left, and this, of course, is Vatican II. This is neo-modernism, or the rerun of modernism, neo-modernism, and it's Vatican II. And that is, Vatican II is the churchman going along with the modern world. The churchman adapting the whole of the Catholic religion to the modern world. It's a rerun of modernism. Now, Pius X has scotched modernism and driven it underground like a snake. But modern men, they love their modern world. And therefore there's a famous modernist called Marc Saulnier, who headed a movement called the Sillon. Again, Pius X condemned it because it was false. It was liberal, basically liberal ideas. He condemned it, but Marc Saulnier, oh yes, Holy Father, I agree. Yes, I submit, Holy Father. Yeah. But really he didn't. And so again, we get the hypocrisy of modern times. A modern man is difficult to convince. You can try to persuade him, but arguments don't have a grip on modern man. Modern man doesn't go by arguments. He doesn't think. How many people do you know today that really think? Not many. People today go by their feelings. They go by their sentiments, which is why politics work by television. Who's got the more toothpastey smile on television? Who looks good on television? A politician today has to look good on television. Absolutely indispensable. Politics go by television, they go by etc., etc. They don't go by the content. They go very little by the content. Modern man is not a content man. He's not a content man, he's not content. The mass, this time the mass of Catholics, because you've got a lot of Catholics living in the big city by the 1960s, big cities all over the world, and in the big city, for instance, artificial means of birth control seem necessary, indispensable. And so there's great pressure of many, many, many Catholics upon their priests, upon their cardinals, and the cardinals and priests are also, they're not praying enough. That's undoubtedly a problem, a serious problem. They're not praying enough, they don't have grace, And that's what St. Thomas More said about the clergy in England at the time of Protestants. He said, does anyone remember that quote? The clergy don't have grace. I think it was St. Thomas More's comment. Because they weren't praying enough. They weren't praying properly. Television and radio and the newspapers are distracting the churchmen. They're pressure from many of the laity, not by any means all of the laity. There was more resistance to Vatican II amongst the laity than there was amongst the priests. And one reason for that is that the devil works harder on priests than he does on the laity. Because if the devil can catch one priest, he's going to catch 3 or 5 or 800 souls. If he catches one layman, it's one layman and perhaps his family, 8 or 10 souls. But to catch a priest is much more payload to corrupt a priest than to corrupt a layman. So, the devil works hard on the churchmen, and by this, with all of this, with now centuries of steady, more and more subtle, more and more pervasive, more and more shared around corruption, this time almost the whole church swings over to the left. Neo-modernism is exactly parallel to modernism, to liberalism and Protestantism. It's always a swing, as we've said ever since the French Revolution, a swing to the left. Why do we talk? When did people start talking about right and left, and why? Answer: it was the French Revolution. It was one of the sessions of the Parliament that was making the French Revolution, and at one point they divided right and left amongst the moderate revolutionaries on the right and the rabid revolutionaries on the left. And that's why we talk ever since of right and left. But actually, if you go back to the French Revolution, interestingly, both the right and the left were revolutionary. Only the right was more moderately revolutionary than the left. So, these are all swings to the left, because it's the revolution, this you could call all of this the revolution against the Catholic Church.